Hi everybody, welcome to FOSG's third Zoom meeting, Zoom session. This session will be on the to address the question: is it time to liberalize the Singapore media landscape? We have actually 6 very interesting speakers. First is Cherian George, who is in Hong Kong. He's a media professor of media studies. We have Balji, PN Balji, who is a veteran of the Singapore media landscape. Then we have Tohan Shi from South China Morning Post, and he's also a veteran, but based in Hong Kong. Then we have Terry, who is an independent media outlet in Singapore. And then finally, we have Kirsten. Kirsten Han is a freelancer. Before we go into the speakers, which I will call upon in the order that I have introduced them, let me just say a few words from my own direct personal experience. I was among the group of young Singaporeans in 1971 who responded to the events of 1971, in which the Lee Kuan Yew government closed down 3 newspapers: the Nanyang Siampao, the Singapore Herald, and the Eastern Sun, on the basis that they were all not serving the national interest. Firstly, because Nanyang Siampao was accused of being whipping up Chinese communal sentiments, and that's a no-no for Singapore. The Eastern Sun was accused of being a Chinese Communist Front operation in the person of Okao, who is the owner. Okao, by the way, is a relative of the Aubun Hall family, and Sally Osian was actually directing the policy of the newspaper from Hong Kong. And then there was a Singapore Herald, whose editor was a guy called Francis Wong, who was a rather independent spirit. He used to write for the Straits Times under the name of Wong Jilik, rather critical and rather analytical. When the licenses of all 3 newspapers were removed, they automatically had to close down. In the case of the Singapore Herald, a group of us decided to take over the paper as a cooperative, because the accusation of the Singapore Herald was that it was a CIA front operation, because the Lee Kuan Yew charge was that it had received $2 million of unsecured loans from Chase Manhattan Bank. And therefore, the suspicion is that it was a US CIA front operation. And it also happened that Francis Wong was not a very obedient editor. There were news items that he was told specifically not to publish, but he went ahead and published it. And so license was withdrawn. There was a huge public reaction to it, to the closure of the Singapore Herald, and lots of people donated a lot of money to the paper. Some of us were rather dismayed by this, because the paper was in receivership and all the money would have gone to the receiver. So we started a cooperative to hold the money, which was placed in the hands of Mr. T.Q. Lim, who is a lawyer, right, to be in charge of the money. And the composition of the cooperative was, the chairman was actually Tommy Koh. And the very famous economist Lee Su-an was also a member, myself, a few others. We were told to apply for the license, had a meeting with Mr. Rajaratnam. Raja was very supportive of the idea. He thinks that we need a second English language paper in Singapore. But at the meeting with him in City Hall, sitting at the end of the table was Jake Yun Tong, who was the Minister of Culture. And Jake said very sarcastically, this is nonsense because this is just new wine in old bottles. So we didn't take much notice because Raja was calling the shots. So at a meeting with Raja in his house on Saturday morning, he was very supportive. But on Sunday, Lee Kuan Yew went to Helsinki to confront the Singapore Press Institute in Helsinki to make his case about why the newspapers had to be shut. And when he was asked the question by one of the members of the International Press Institute, what is your response to the effort by the Singapore Herald Cooperative to buy over the paper? He said that in a very sweeping gesture, it's a ploy. So on Monday, when we applied, we didn't get the license. So it's very interesting that for me, it seems like the whole newspaper press medium has come one full circle. And today we are faced with the prospect of the Straits Times English language paper being restructured. So this is the situation we are in. And I would like the panel to talk about the media landscape of Singapore and to address the question, why is it time? Or in fact, the time has not changed, that we still need total press control, total press monopoly, right? But it's not quite entirely a monopoly because we have other forms of media outlet, social media, and so on. So I would like now to ask Cherian to give us a broad overview of the situation in the media, right? And then we will follow from there. So Cherian, can you come on, please?
Thank you very much, Keng Soon. First of all, thanks for inviting me, but I think more importantly, thanks for still caring after 50 years. I think many people would have been discouraged and given up hope, and it's wonderful. And I think
maybe I'm just bloody-minded.
Maybe, but any journalists should wish for more bloody-minded and caring citizens like you, sir. So I think thanks very much. Well, I think if you've read some of my pieces, you know I have strong views on this topic. But I thought it might be more helpful for our discussion if I took a step back and made 3 broad observations about the debate so far. First, what exactly is the problem with the national newspaper company? I think we can specify 3 separate issues. One is the breakdown of the century-old business model that used to allow media organizations to invest substantially in the kind of journalism that helps people become better citizens, news and commentary about public affairs. Such journalism used to be bundled with more entertaining news as well as with advertising. The internet has disaggregated this bundle, exposing the cruel fact that public interest journalism by itself is not something that enough people are willing to pay for. It is what economists call a public good subject to market failure. 2, the PAP government's chokehold on public discourse prevents Singapore journalism from rising to its potential. Of course, the national media still perform a reliable service in many respects. The state is a huge part of people's lives. So if a news service provides timely and accurate news about everything from COVID-19 restrictions to school admission policy changes to new schemes for small businesses, such media will be generally trusted. But of course, in any country, there will be instances where the interests of the rulers diverge periodically from the interests of the people that they rule. And in those specific moments, that's when people around the world intuitively expect the press to speak up for them. But it is precisely in those instances where the government demands that the press tells the people that they are wrong and that officials are right every single time. This is not a formula for developing customer loyalty. Third, the SPH may have been suffering a leadership crisis. So according to this theory that many people hold, even given the digital disruption, even with government control, SPH should be doing better. And I think there's some prima facie evidence of a competency gap. Compare MediaCorp, right? Consider that MediaCorp's Tham Lok Keng had almost 20 years of industry experience when she was appointed CEO 4 years ago, including holding top positions in the highly competitive markets of Taiwan and Hong Kong. SPH, meanwhile, has been led by CEOs with zero media experience and, in many cases, zero commercial experience of any kind for the past quarter century. Now, I'd agree with Corbin Wan that there is, in fact, no shortage of talented Singaporeans, including for topmost positions. Take Gina Chua, a former SBC and ST journalist who has run 2 newspapers in highly competitive markets, the South China Morning Post and the Asian Wall Street Journal. She's now executive editor of Reuters, a news organization far larger than SPH. So the talent is out there. I think all 3 factors, journalism's financial crisis, Singapore's press controls, SPH's self-inflicted leadership failures play a part. What's debatable is how big each factor is, to what extent they are interrelated, whether it is even possible to crack one challenge without addressing the other 2, and so on. And I predict that the disagreements that are likely to emerge even this afternoon in this discussion will be of this nature. What's the balance of blame for these 3 factors? My second big observation concerns our wishes for SPH. I think it would be unrealistic and unfair to burden SPH, or in fact any single media organization, with all our pent-up desires for a better media system. There are things that a large mass market news organization like SPH can do that smaller alternative media can't. But conversely, big media face certain limitations. For both economic and political reasons, they cannot stray too far from the middle ground. Those of us who are further from the center, whether it's liberals and progressives like me, or say religious conservatives, can't realistically expect SPH to champion our worldviews. Having said that, SPH, I think, can be fairer and more representative, even within its current economic and political limits. I think it's reasonable to demand that SPH not shut out alternative views the way it does now, even if we concede that SPH titles need to gravitate towards the mean. It is reasonable to expect it to allow for more standard deviation, to stick with the statistical metaphor. Even if SPH has to broadly align itself with government agenda, it could still give a much broader platform for contrarian views. And I think this is where even insiders and former insiders, including journalists who are not anti-government, do have a problem with the status quo. It is understandable that a national media would lean gently towards the PAP, just as most Singaporeans do. But it can afford to do this less unthinkingly. I think a paper that insults the intelligence of its readers routinely does the government no favors. There is, of course, a point beyond which SPH and MediaCorp cannot go. And I think to condemn them for not going further is like blaming a caged watchdog for failing to stop an intruder. It's not the watchdog's fault that it's caged. The hard political limits within which media are forced to operate is not something that SPH in whatever form can unilaterally address. We, the people, need to work that out with the government. Which brings me to my final observation concerning the role of the public. We've seen a strong public reaction to the SPH announcement a couple of weeks ago, and this forum is a manifestation of that. But I'm skeptical that people actually have the patience or resolve to make a difference. There is a big difference between the slacktivism of sharing memes or buying umbrage merchandise and the serious work of a citizen movement for media diversity. I know many intelligent Singaporeans were incredulous about statements made by the Minister S. Cherian and SPH Media Chairman designate Corbin Wan, who have acted as if political control of the press is a non-issue. I think it seemed to many people like the establishment is in denial. But I want to suggest that maybe they have a firmer grasp of the situation than the critics do. From a purely political point of view, was Cherian wrong to claim that the system ain't broke? Is the PAP wrong to bet that Singaporeans, after loudly complaining, will quickly move on? Think about it. Even though SPH restructuring is quite radical, the main bones of contention are actually nothing new. Singaporeans have lived with the PAP media model in the past. Why would the future be any different? Many claim to be unhappy with Khaw Boon Wan's appointment as chairman, but he's just the latest in a 30-year line of trusted ministers and mandarins managing the media. People got upset before too, but the disquiet died down. Why should this time be any different? Many are also unhappy that the media industry is a closed shop, that the national media are protected from competition, but this is nothing new either. Voters knew this when they went to the polls the last 13 times, and each time they overwhelmingly endorsed the PAP that has openly, even proudly declared that it is against press freedom. The biggest change this time is the decision to help finance SPH with government funding. But how new is that? That's always been the case with MediaCorp. And think about the public funds poured into thinly disguised political campaigns like SG50. Including in the run-up to elections. Think about the state's use of paid influencers and covert methods of computational propaganda. Think about pro-government trolls that harass and incite hate against citizens who are classified as political opponents. Officials haven't renounced or denounced such practices, nor have they denied coordinating them or funding them directly or indirectly. So all in all, SPH Media will certainly not be the first time taxpayers are footing the bill for their own indoctrination and manipulation. Singaporeans know all this and seem not to care. So this doesn't sound like a situation where the PAP is out of touch with reality. It seems that it's the public that's in denial. I mean, of course, you may say that people are helpless, but I don't accept that. I'm glad Keng Soon reminded us of what his and his comrades did 50 years ago. We can learn from, our moderator, right? 50 years ago this month, as he said, when a small newspaper titled the Singapore Herald was threatened with closure, Keng Soon was part of a small group of concerned citizens who tried to mount a rescue bid. They set up a Singapore Herald Trust Fund. So yes, 50 years before SPH, they landed on the idea of trust-owned newspaper to operate the Herald as a 100% Singaporean newspaper, independent of any political party. They were too late. Next Friday is the 50th anniversary of the newspaper's death. But the principle remains relevant. If citizens seriously want to develop independent media online, not just with commentaries and very occasional original reporting, but with daily news coverage of national affairs, like Rappler in the Philippines, Malaysia Kini in Malaysia, The Wire and Scroll in India, The Reporter in Taiwan, there is no major legal and regulatory hurdle stopping them from doing it. The main impediments are in the public mind. Singaporeans continue to delude themselves that high-quality journalism does not need to be paid for. They will pay for Netflix and football channels and Spotify and video games, but they think the news should be free. They think they don't need large teams of journalists whose full-time job is to keep track of matters of public interest, because Facebook and WhatsApp friends will tell them what's going on. So in summary, I think we're suffering from a triple denial. The government refuses to acknowledge that it is part of the problem. Newspaper managements protected from competition won't acknowledge their own inadequacies, and the public is in denial about its own complicity. Journalism's market failure is at heart, I think, a moral failure on the part of citizens who will pay for media that turn them into obedient consumers in a capitalist system, but not for media that will make them more engaged and better citizens. Thank you.